Welcome to another episode of Killer Conversations. You ever get that feeling like something is just off?
Oh, absolutely.
Like a picture that's perfectly staged, but there's a key detail missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you say that. That's kind of the vibe that we're getting with today's case. The suspicious death of Kendra Jackson.
Yeah.
And the investigation that uncovered some seriously dark secrets.
Wow. So let's set the scene then. It's June 12th, 2015. Macon, Georgia. We have a frantic 911 call from William Pounds, who is a well-respected local pastor, and he's reporting that his fiancée, Kendra Jackson, has shot herself.
Right away, you have this jarring contrast, a man of God reporting a violent and tragic death.
Right.
It's the kind of scenario that immediately grabs your attention.
It's like a scene from a movie.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Kendra was 46 years old. She was a divorced mother, known for her vibrant personality. Friends described her as the perfect mix of classy and sassy.
Yeah.
Full of life.
Right.
Her death sent shockwaves through the community.
Of course.
Nobody could believe that she would take her own life.
And that disbelief is a common thread in cases like this. You know, people struggle to reconcile the person they knew with the acts that they're accused of, or in this case, a victim of.
Right.
And it's that dissonance that often obscures the truth.
And the truth was far more complicated than it initially appeared.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Shelly Rutherford, the lead detective on the case, arrived at the scene and immediately started noticing things that didn't add up.
Okay.
The bed was perfectly made. Not exactly what you would expect at a suicide scene.
That's a great point. Think about it. Someone in the throes of despair, contemplating suicide, isn't likely to worry about making the bed.
Yeah.
It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the potential staging of the scene.
Exactly. And then there were the missing bullet casings.
Oh, wow.
I mean, wouldn't you expect to find them at the scene if a gun had been fired?
Absolutely. The absence of those casings is a huge red flag. It suggests that someone deliberately tampered with the scene, potentially trying to conceal evidence.
And remember, investigators live for those little inconsistencies.
I bet they do.
They're like breadcrumbs leading to a bigger story.
Okay, so there were 2 bullet holes.
Yeah.
One in the mattress and one in Kendra's head. And while a practice shot can happen in suicide cases, the missing casings, in this instance, really threw up a red flag for investigators.
And you have to consider the psychology behind that. Someone planning to take their own life might fire a test shot, sure, but they're less likely to worry about cleaning up or staging the scene afterward. Those actions point towards a deliberate attempt to mislead.
It really makes you wonder about William Pounds,
Yeah.
right? He's this beloved pastor, this pillar of the community, but there's this nagging feeling that something isn't right.
It's that duality that makes this case so intriguing.
Yeah.
We have this image of Pounds as a man of faith, someone who is supposed to be a source of comfort and guidance.
Right.
Yet the evidence is starting to paint a very different picture.
And as the investigation continued, things got even more suspicious.
Pounds' story starts to unravel, and the inconsistencies pile up. Initially, he claimed he was in bed when the shot was fired, but as we established, that perfectly made bed contradicted his story.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to create this image of a peaceful night suddenly shattered by tragedy. But the physical evidence just didn't support that narrative.
Right. And then his account of how Kendra got the gun kept changing. First, he said that she tried to take it from him. Then he flipped it and said he tried to wrestle it away from her.
Those shifting narratives are classic signs of deception. When someone is lying, they often struggle to keep their story straight, especially under the pressure of a police investigation.
So we have these inconsistencies,
Yeah.
and then comes the real bombshell.
Oh boy, what's that?
Investigators discover that Pounds had another fiancée,
What?
and he was planning to marry her on the same day that Kendra died.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. That changes everything. We've gone from a potentially tragic suicide to a possible motive for murder.
It completely reframes the entire case.
Right.
And investigators start to zero in on those seemingly insignificant details,
Such as?
like that toilet flush heard on the 911 call.
Interesting. It just seems like such a calculated move, right?
It does, doesn't it? Makes
Yeah.
you think.
Yeah.
And investigators suspected that Pounds was disposing of evidence, though they couldn't prove it definitively. But it's yet another piece of the puzzle that doesn't quite fit with his version of events.
Right.
And then there's the blood evidence.
Oh, no.
Remember, Pounds claimed that Kendra shot herself with her left hand, but you said there was blood on her left palm.
Yeah, if she'd pulled the trigger, the gun would have been in her hand, making it impossible for her palm to be covered in blood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The forensic evidence just didn't support his story.
Wow.
It's these inconsistencies, the story that keeps changing, the evidence that doesn't line up, that chip away at the facade, revealing the truth that lies beneath.
It's like building a case brick by brick. Each piece of evidence, each inconsistency adds another layer to the investigation, pointing more and more towards Pound's guilt.
And eventually those bricks form a pretty solid wall.
Yeah.
The contradictions, the physical evidence, the second fiancé, it all added up to a very disturbing picture. And investigators arrested Pounds for murder.
It's a shocking turn of events for the community. You have this beloved pastor, someone they trusted, accused of such a heinous crime. How did they react?
Well, it's remarkable, really. Despite the mounting evidence against him, many people refused to believe that Pounds was capable of murder. They rallied around him, even helping him raise that hefty $500,000 bond.
It's a powerful example of how our perceptions of someone can cloud our judgment, even in the face of strong evidence. You know, it's that inherent trust we place in authority figures, especially religious leaders.
Absolutely. But Pounds quickly proved those supporters wrong. He violated the terms of his release almost immediately, confirming what investigators had suspected all along.
That's got to be devastating for all those people who supported him.
It was a wake-up call for the entire community. This wasn't just a tragic case of domestic violence. This was a calculated act of murder, concealed beneath this veneer of respectability.
Which brings us to the trial. This must have been a challenging case to prosecute given Pound's standing in the community.
So the trial began in October of 2017, and the prosecution was definitely concerned about that halo effect.
You think?
Would the jury be able to see past Pound's charm and his position as a pastor? After all, this was someone people looked up to, someone they confided in.
It's fascinating how our brains work, right? We tend to associate positive traits in one area of a person's life with their overall character, but in this case, the evidence was hard to ignore.
It was. And even though Pounds took the stand in his own defense, the jury saw through the facade. They found him guilty of felony murder.
A life sentence without parole, that's a heavy sentence. A testament to the severity of the crime and the calculated nature of his actions.
The judge didn't mince words at the sentencing either. He called Pounds a charlatan, essentially confirming what investigators had suspected all along. This wasn't a man of God. This was a man who used his position of power to manipulate and deceive.
So this wasn't just about the tragic loss of Kendra Jackson. It was about the unraveling of a carefully constructed persona, the exposure of a wolf in sheep's clothing.
And at the heart of it all is the meticulous work of the investigators who refused to accept the easy narrative. They dug deeper. They questioned everything, and they ultimately brought a killer to justice. It's chilling, isn't it? To think that someone could live this double life for so long, deceiving an entire community. And it makes you wonder, how many other cases like this are out there, where the truth is hidden beneath layers of respectability and deceit?
It is a sobering thought, but this case also highlights the importance of vigilance, of questioning assumptions. Even when it comes to those we trust, it's a reminder that evil can wear many masks, and sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who appear harmless.
Exactly. And for our listeners who love true crime, I think this case offers some valuable takeaways. Like, remember how those seemingly insignificant details at the crime scene, the made bed, the missing bullet casings, turned out to be crucial clues?
Absolutely. It underscores the power of observation, of paying attention to the things that don't quite add up. That's where the real story often lies, in those little discrepancies that challenge the initial narrative.
It's like being a detective in your own life, right? Always be observant, always question, and never be afraid to dig a little deeper if something feels off.
It's such a great point. We often dismiss our gut feelings, but they can be incredibly insightful. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore those red flags.
This case really had me hooked from the start. The twists and turns, the unraveling of Pound's persona. It's like something out of a crime novel. But it's a stark reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction. And sometimes the most shocking stories are the ones that happen in our own backyards.
And unfortunately, cases like this remind us that darkness can lurk, even in the most unexpected places. But they also highlight the courage and determination of those who fight for justice, those who refuse to let the truth be buried.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can we learn from the case of Kendra Jackson and William Pounds?
I think the biggest lesson here is the importance of critical thinking. Don't just accept things at face value. Question assumptions, especially when something feels off. Look for inconsistencies. Pay attention to those details, and don't be afraid to speak up. If you suspect something's wrong, you might just be the one who helps bring justice to light.
Well said.
It's a fascinating and disturbing case that really underscores the importance of vigilance, both in our personal lives and in our communities. And it reminds us that the pursuit of truth is a journey that requires both courage and a keen eye for detail.
And that brings us to the end of another episode. We hope you found this exploration insightful and thought-provoking. Don't forget to share your thoughts and reactions with us in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.